Hello and welcome to another episode of Business on the Wire. The Q1 GDP numbers are out. They are a little bit lower than estimates, but frankly, I don't think anyone was expecting to see anything different. The bigger question and the bigger problem is what from here? Many of these sins could get washed away, saying this was the intense lockdown period. Unfortunately, though, from here on, the green shoots that the government was referring to don't seem to have cropped up as expected. Joining me to talk about those Q1 figures and more importantly, what the road ahead looks like is economist Salman. So Salman, thank you so much for joining in. Your quick, overview first of these figures. They are a little bit more depressing than people expected, but what did you make of it and which details really stood out for you?
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Mitali, for having me. It is pretty grim news, actually. It is towards the bottom to the lower end of the projections. In fact, came very close to 25%, which is one of the I think one of the agencies had suggested that might happen. SBI had said 16%.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, this is the worst in decades, and while some might say that this is an act of God, as I think the finance minister has said, I think there is a lot of, there must be some accountability for why we have these numbers. This is, I think, going to be easily the worst GDP growth in Asia for this quarter.
Emerging markets as well, yeah.
It's also one of the must be one of the worst in emerging, among the big economies in the world. So that's that. But there are things in the data that are even to my mind outrageous. It kind of boils the blood sometimes. Of course, we have manufacturing. It's about negative 40%. You have construction. I don't know. It's negative 40 or 50%.
Yeah.
Construction is also in that range. But shockingly, government expenditure is at negative 10%. At a time when governments around the world are trying to spend money to support economies, support their people, support people who are living on the margins, the government of India has actually managed to contract spending. I find that shocking. It's a shocking dereliction of duty. And I don't really understand what's going on with this government. What exactly do they want from the people of India? How much Atmanirbharta do they want? I mean, this at a time when everybody has been saying there must be a robust fiscal response. So I think we can talk about COVID-19. We can talk about what's happening globally. And we must, because putting this in the global context is important to understand where India is. But just looking at these numbers, it's frankly, it boils to blood because people are going to pay for this. And poor people are going to pay for this. Hundreds of millions of people are going to pay for this because, as any expert will tell you, when you have these kinds of crises, when you have these shocks to the system, the sooner you grapple with it, the lesser the long-term damage is, because there will be, no matter what happens, no matter what kind of response you mount, and I will share some information with you later, whatever response you mount, there's going to be some long-term lasting damage. Scars will remain, some output will never come back. But the key thing is, if you grapple with this quickly, if you grapple with this fast in a robust way, you mitigate that long-term damage. I think the government of India has clearly not learned that lesson.
It also doesn't capture what happened in the unorganized space, Salman, and I think that's the pocket that's really hemorrhaging. What surprised me though was that after these figures, there were some comments from economic commentators saying now's when the government is going to throw caution to the wind and really come out with a lot of fiscal stimulus. Would you expect to see anything happen after these Q1 numbers in terms of, now we're really going to fire up the fiscal engine?
Mithali, your point is so important. So important. Ever since demonetisation, we just have not fully understood, I think, what has happened to the informal economy. This whole idea that we're going to formalize, this whole idea, that magically the informal sector will, go away. That's obviously ridiculous, because informal is normal. But what has happened over time in the last few years is that we're simply not able to capture the devastation in the informal economy, whether it was demonetization, whether it was GST, whether it is the lockdown. Think about where the impact must have been the most. It was in the informal economy. And our estimates, to my mind, have routinely underestimated what is going on in the informal economy. How is it possible that the best growth year for this government was the year of demonetization? How is it possible? I mean, it boggles the mind. And that is, I think, 8% or 8.2%. Since that time, we are on a downward trajectory. So even before we went into the crisis, we were already, going down rapidly.
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about 4.2% in FY 19-20, but the last quarter was what, 3.1%.
Yeah.
And now we're at about negative 24%. But this negative 24% is likely to be an underestimate. Now, when people say that we're going to, the government is going to throw caution to the wind, what caution are we talking about? If the government doesn't understand, and these commentators don't seem to understand that when you have a crisis like this, you can't have any caution. You can't, because your people are going to die. People are going to starve. People are going to lose their jobs. People are going to lose their businesses. And the sooner you act, you save as much as you can. That's what you do. You fight furiously to save whatever you can. It's like your child, God forbid, is drowning, and you do whatever you can to jump and do whatever you need to save that child. That's the attitude any government should have. I mean, I know that the Indian government does not have the resources of most advanced economies in the world, but this is the time to borrow and spend. Or was, actually it was. These months of delay are going to have a huge long-term impact on India. Do not for a moment think that we're going to recover in a year or two. Yeah. I think we're talking loss of a decade, maybe decades. That's where we are. Sorry to say.
Within that decade, perhaps, of trouble, Salman, I think what's worrying is the trajectory that you mentioned for the GDP, which got to 3.1% till the last quarter. But for this time round, what bothered me was the services figure, minus 20.6%, trade and hotels, minus 47%. This has really traditionally been the only sort of outlier for an economy that was floundering. People were going out, they were consuming things, there was some trade and tourism. Nothing has come by way of support for that space. What do you see specifically for services and trade and tourism going ahead, Salman?
This is such a complicated thing now, right? I mean, the only area that's really shown some resilience is the agricultural sector. Our farmers are keeping us up, right? I mean, I think the farm sector is growing at about 3 or 4%. For the other sectors, I mean, if you think about what the economy is going to face, right? I mean, either you're going to have disruptions in trade or disruptions in, travel industry. We know that. We understand that. What do you do to keep these people going, right? The government never really discussed any policy measures of a major, they talked about liquidity and all this stuff, the RBI came out with a lot of things. In fact, if you look at what the government has done so far, government and the RBI, it's mostly on the RBI side, right? The government has, mostly the government is in perception management. Oh, we're going to have a 10% of GDP as a stimulus and all this stuff. That's nonsense. If you're going to tell people, here, I'm going to give you a loan, my support to you is in the form of a loan at this time when there's so much business uncertainty. How do you invest? I mean, it's a totally rational decision to not invest, to perhaps save for a rainy day. And by the way, saving, I mean, I don't know, there's so many loose ends here. The word saving reminds me, by the way, that household savings have been depleted in India, right? Household debt now is at a record high. I think at least was in 2019. So, as far as these sectors are concerned, could you figure out what, think about this loan moratorium business that's been going on, right? Which ends, I think, in September. And by the way, we haven't even spoken about the banking sector and what's going to happen in the banking sector. But if you have a moratorium and your interest is piling up, what do? Because that becomes a new loan in a way at a time when you have no business. The government basically comes out with announcements like, oh, we will not have a penalty on maybe late filing of GST or something. What are you talking about? Do you think anybody cares? You need to provide direct support to businesses that are viable. You've got to figure it out. And by the way, please do not rely on only government experts. This is the time to bring in everybody. Everybody should be on the table and discussing it. Stakeholders, MSME associations, big business associations, I don't care who it is, economists from the outside, economists from the government, everybody should be putting their heads together and saying, what are we going to do now? This is an emergency. It was an emergency months back.
Yeah.
It is now a dire emergency. And I don't know, I mean, maybe you can tell how much I'm kind of, how much I feel this, because I know the impact of this is not going to be, Mitali, on people like you and I that much, It's going to be on really, really, those people, many of those people, hundreds of thousands of people who are walking home and their families home, back home, people living in the margin. I think and we need to do something. And I will not say that, do this or do that, but I do think that this is the time to come together and get the best minds and get the stakeholders and say, okay, how can we do something for you right now? I mean, I don't see how. I mean, we should get to the banking sector because I don't see how this can be mitigated right away now. I mean, I think the government has to start thinking about serious, spending of money. I don't see what other sector is going to pick up. Nobody's going to invest right now. You think business environment in India is good? Don't go by the World Bank's ease of doing business rankings, I'm sorry to say, although I'm a former World Banker myself. But if ease of business was that great, then everybody would be investing in India. Everybody would be. Nobody is.
What are the repercussions for the banking industry, Salman? Because at this point, anecdotally, you can see that there is enough liquidity parked with them, but there is a logjam because the banks simply do not want to lend. They've got enough NPAs on their books. They don't want to take this on in a post-COVID situation. Where from here for the banking space?
Very, very tough situation. And by the way, thanks to BJP's politics, this is part of what happens. You start vilifying a sector, and sure enough, as rational human beings, managers and those decision makers who have to give loans, they will basically be careful. I mean, be extra careful, very cautious. And they know what's coming. So what's coming? Let's think about it. So you've taken a loan, you're a business, and you're in the construction industry, or you're in the travel industry. Your business is finished. Yeah, we see a contraction of what, 40-50%. You have a moratorium. You've not been paying your EMIs. Now, 6 months later or whatever, you have to you basically say, okay, now my time is up. That interest has compounded, but you still have no money because you have no sales. So what do? If you have an asset-backed kind of loan, what is the bank going to do with that asset? Is the bank going to go and say, okay, you know what? You mortgage your land, I'm going to sell that land? Imagine imagine what will be happening in the bank. And by the way, the banking sector has been in trouble for a decade now.
Yeah.
Maybe 7, 8 years at least, right? Now, when people ask me, oh, UPA people, phone banking, all this stuff, I say, are you mad? Do you think that all loans in the that banks give are just, you pick up the phone and somebody gives them a loan? People made bets during a time when the economy was growing really well. As Raghuram Rajan also said, there were genuine defaults, but there was also some corruption. No, that is fine. That happened. Not fine that the corruption happened, but we understand that happened. But NPAs were rising. This government comes in, does not really focus on NPAs. I'm sure the RBI gave a briefing on the NPA situation, which was still manageable at that time, but they didn't focus on those things. They focused on administrative efficiency. That has grown now. And that grew and has become a much bigger problem. And now with this, I think this will require a lot of government resources, and somebody's got to, you got to bite the bullet. Otherwise, the banking sector is the lifeblood of the economy. Basically, what's happening to the economy is because of the banking sector, it has been happening for some time, is that it keeps getting periodic kind of heart attacks, right? Because your arteries are clogged. Now we're going to go for massive cardiac arrest because a lot of these loans are not going to be repaid. Banks are going to be in huge trouble, to my mind. And the government has to step in. The RBI has to do something because otherwise India's economy is going to be these numbers of 23%, 24%, these don't really, they're just data, we understand. But the banking sector needs to be protected.
So let me ask you to paint a picture for, on two counts, Salman. One is that you said you foresee many more years of pain. It's not going to be a couple of quarters. What do you think that's going to look like? And secondly, there is the fear now that perhaps we are going to hit some kind of permanent unemployment situation. You know what I mean when I say permanent, it means quarters and quarters of, no jobs, basically, which really leads to this glut of people staying unemployed for an extremely long period of time. On both counts, what do you see in the next few years?
Okay, so the IMF has been doing research on these kinds of topics. What happens when there's an external shock, when there's a shock basically to an economy goes into recession. What happens to output? Because that is, they did the study cross country, about 190 countries. They looked at this over a period of time, and they've done it periodically, and they've been updating their data. So what they say is that they give the example of the U.S. from the global financial crisis of 2008. And what they say is that the U.S., and this has been corroborated by the Federal Reserve Bank in the U.S. as well, that it took the U.S. more than 10 years to get back to that previous trajectory. Okay?
Yeah.
Pre-crisis trajectory, it took the U.S. more than 10 years. Now, that was a financial sector kind of crisis. Of course, it affected the US and Europe and advanced economies much more than it affected countries like India and China. But what the IMF researchers say, and again, this has been corroborated by a variety of experts, is that some part of the output is lost forever. Okay? What does that mean? What that means is, imagine you're a business. And so let's talk about, take an employee and take a business. You're a worker and you lose a job because of the crisis. And after some time, there is some recovery and you can potentially get your job back, right? It may be easier to get your job back. But if you lose your business, it's not as if you can just turn a switch and the business comes back. Many businesses basically do not come back. That output is lost forever. Now you'll say, maybe new businesses will come up. Yes, but new businesses come up all the time. But some of those businesses will never come back. That output will be lost. And employment associated with that output will be lost. Okay? So we must understand that, we will see hopefully soon, growth will start rebounding, but it'll be off a very low base. because even during this time we've seen that there is some activity coming up, and industrial production is kind of not contracting. I know the IIP today contracted again, but that has slowed down the contraction.
Yes.
So eventually this will come back up again, but some of that output will be gone. And to get back to the pre-crisis trajectory, I think it'll take India, based on what other countries have seen, to my mind, decade. At least a decade, if not decade. Now, getting to the employment situation. You see, in India, unemployment rates as we calculate them are fairly low because everybody's trying to do something or the other. Everybody's trying to eke out a living. So you can say that these people are employed. But what could happen is, because you have loss of output in some parts of the economy, and that's not going to come back, people who had relatively decent jobs, or they may be forced to take up jobs that are less good, right? So you may still be employed, but not as you may actually fall down on the income ladder, and that is going to, I think that is definitely going to happen. The other thing is, remember that when we talk about poverty in India, and we have the older data, which is about used to say that about 21% or 22% of Indians live in poverty. You have to think about the poverty. Imagine there's a poverty line. So there are people, 21% or so are below this line, according to data from a few years back. But there are just hundreds of millions of people just above that line.
Yeah.
And when these kinds of shocks happen, they fall below the line. So poverty in India is going to increase too. That means malnourishment of children is going to increase too. That means our productive citizens, the future, those who are babies right now, kids right now, their productivity in life is going to decrease. So this is going to have repercussions. That is why I feel so frustrated. That is why we must do everything we can to, put the kitchen, throw the kitchen sink at this thing, because there is no other way. Because otherwise, we're actually, reducing India's potential for a long, long time. And please, I keep hearing about 8% potential, 7% potential. That is not, there is no guarantee of such growth. I don't understand what people are, I think some people are smoking something. 8% is not India's birthright. 7% is not India's birthright. There's only one large economy in the world that has grown around 9% plus over the last 40 years, that's China. But China is an outlier. It doesn't mean India is going to have the same thing. If India doesn't do the right things, if India doesn't do the right kinds of reforms, if India doesn't actually, go in this direction with looking at whatever is happening in the world and then trying to see what we can do better, there is no birthright 8% growth or 7% growth. So I think we need to come out of that. It's like people are smoking something.
I want to swivel for a second on what this means for state finances as well, Salman. That's really been the big battle. I think states have been presented with a fait accompli, which all the finance ministers of these states have said is both unfair and wasn't discussed. Where do you think this leaves the states, which are, really hamstrung right now?
So, obviously there's GST battles going on between the states and the center. I think the center has taken a position which is frankly dishonest, very dishonest position. And I think what the center must realize is that the only way for India to progress is if you decentralize more, not centralize more. And if you're not going to devolve powers, if you're not going to devolve finances properly, you're going to hurt this recovery. How else shall we explain this? That the activity is in the states. There is no such thing as India is growing and the states are not growing. All of this growth business is in the states. That's where activity happens. If you're going to cripple them, you're going to cripple India's economy. I don't know. This is such an obvious point, but seems to me that somehow the government of India, New Delhi, seems to think that this is their problem, not our problem. They should be Atmanirbhar. We have our own things to deal with. If the government of India starts thinking that the states and state finances are divorced from what is happening, to the broader economy, then I think there's a serious problem. They don't seem to then get the basics right, and I don't understand how that happens. Because, for example, the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council has some really good people. I mean, they had them earlier. I mean, they had Ratin Roy earlier. I know there are some good people right now. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're not heard. Who knows? Because if you're not taking advice from these people, I don't know whose advice you're taking. I mean, I know that some people felt that the government should. There were these suggestions that government should not be spending too much. There's fiscal deficit problems and all this stuff. What will the ratings agencies say? Are you mad? Which ratings agency right now is going to downgrade a country for fighting this battle? That ratings agency would basically be laughed out of town. Right now is the time to fight hard. And you cannot fight if you cripple state governments, because that's where the rubber hits the road. They need money. They need money to protect people too. If you cripple them, you're crippling India. I don't understand, honestly.
One final question, Salman. It's the biggest contraction in 40 years. It's also the first one since liberalization. There's a lot of generations that are going to experience this whole thing for the first time. What would you expect to see? Like, what is it going to look and feel like? Because some of it is happening now. People are on furloughs or they've been laid off. They can't consume the way they used to. They can't make up rent for the metros they live in. Over the next few months, what is India going to look and feel like, you think?
I mean, this goes back to your unemployment question. Obviously things are going to be very difficult. I think things are going to be very difficult in India. And this is the longer this goes on for. And by the way, we did not talk about the health crisis, right? I mean, because that is the driver of everything, right? I mean, I want to kind of disabuse the notion that the economy is something else and everything else is something else. Economy is health, economy is education. That's how you actually build economies, right? So unless we get the health crisis under control, I don't think the economic crisis can be brought under control. There has to be a lot more focus on the health emergency. The numbers are still growing. I was just listening to Ashish Jha, who's at Harvard, and who's an expert on epidemiology. And his sense was that these numbers are going to be much higher in the coming months, and that the reported numbers are probably the actual numbers may be about 8 to 10 times maybe more than the report numbers. How can you actually deal with the economy fully if you're not dealing with the health part, the crisis part, the actual disease? You can treat the symptoms, but you have to treat the disease, and you can treat the disease by really you need to test more. You need to know a lot more about this disease. And by the way, you have other things to do. There's so much to be done. Say tomorrow there's a vaccine. How are you going to administer it? How are you going to deliver it? Administer it? What's the prioritization scheme? How will you make sure that people are, get this so that we can get out of this phase? How can we start reducing these numbers? And how can we keep people safe in these coming months when the disease is expected to grow? If we don't pay attention, obviously, then you're talking about these young people, what's going to happen? I think there could be a lot of social discord in India. The unemployed young people is never a good thing for a society. Never a good thing. And I think if anybody is paying attention, the fact that the government's spending declined by about 10%, I would say it is shameful. It is unforgivable. But even now, do something so that you reduce, you mitigate future losses. Make sure, because this is going to cause a lot of grief, a lot of harm to a lot of people and to the country. I'm sorry to, end on a somber note, but, this is, if you don't warn people of what is coming, then I would not be doing it. And I'm not speaking, by the way, just as a member of the Congress Party. No, I'm just speaking as someone who's been studying these issues. And this looks very grim. And I think this looks very, very grim for India's poor and marginalized and vulnerable people.
Some of it is unraveling already as we speak, Salman. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, even though it was such a somber conversation. Thank you very much for joining in with your thoughts today.
Thank you, Mitali. Thank you for having me.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.